Welcome to the Bookroom Duo, where we explore a variety of books. Let's get started. Today, we are unpacking a book that feels, I don't know, like a breakup letter. But not the usual, it's not you, it's me kind.
No, not at all. This is the kind where you sit down, you order coffee, and you very calmly explain why the whole relationship was just built on a lie.
Except the relationship here isn't with a person, it's with the entire idea of Western civilization.
It is a heavy one for sure, but it also manages to be incredibly funny in this really dark, almost absurdist way.
Mhm.
We're looking at One Day, Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El Akkad.
And people might know him as a Giller Prize-winning novelist, a big deal.
They might, yeah. But before that, he was a journalist. And he spent years covering, all of it. The war on terror, Afghanistan, the trials at Guantanamo Bay, the Arab Spring. He was there.
And that title alone,
Yeah.
it sounds like something you'd scream into a pillow after doom scrolling for like 3 hours straight.
It really captures that specific frustration. Ellicott is basically arguing that history, well, it has a way of cleaning itself up. In 50 years, everyone's going to claim they were on the right side of history with everything happening now, especially in Gaza.
Ah, so he's writing this in the messy present.
Exactly. To document who stood where when it actually mattered, he calls the whole collection of essays a severance.
Right, and it should be clear, he's not some outsider throwing rocks. He lives in Portland, Oregon.
Huh.
He's a successful author. He's part of the very system he's, critiquing.
And that is the core tension. He's reckoning with his own complicity. He's seeing his tax dollars fund atrocities against people who look just like him, all while he's living this comfortable suburban life. He kicks off the whole book with this powerful image of the overpressure wave.
I found this part fascinating and, frankly, terrifying. He talks to an old soldier about how bombs actually kill you.
It's pure physics. The soldier explains that with a big bomb, it's not always the shrapnel that gets you first, it's the blast wave. The air gets compressed and then expands so fast that if you're too close, it just forces the air right out of your lungs.
Collapses your organs.
Just like that. And the soldier says there's only one defense,
Distance. You just have to be far enough away.
which becomes the central metaphor for his whole life. He's achieved distance. He lives in what he calls a middle space in Oregon. It's past the progressive part of Portland, but just before you get into what he calls Trump country.
So he's physically safe from the blast wave?
Physically, yes. But psychologically, he's watching the explosion happen in real time on his phone.
And there's that scene that just drives it home, where he's watching his daughter playing in the hallway. She's building a little paper city, right?
Yeah, she is. It's this whole elaborate town made of pink construction paper, with all her stuffed animals arranged just so. A functioning little society. It's pure, innocence.
And he's just a few feet away, scrolling through images from Gaza, seeing actual cities reduced to rubble.
That's the disconnect. His daughter is building a world, while children in Gaza are being dug out of one.
He even tries to bridge that gap with his own kids, doesn't he? He shows them pictures from his childhood in the Middle East.
He does, and it goes about as well as you'd think. There's this one story about a Mercedes.
Oh, this was brilliant.
Yeah.
So back in the 90s, in Egypt or Qatar, where he grew up, having a Mercedes sedan it was the absolute peak.
It wasn't just a car. It was like a flag you could plant that said, "I have arrived." It meant you were safe, you were successful, you mattered.
So he shows this picture of his dad standing proudly next to this 90s Mercedes to his American kids, and they just
Everyone just look at it and go, okay, it's an old car.
totally unimpressed.
And he says it crushed him a little, but it shows that unbridgeable distance. For him, that car is this huge symbol of triumph. For his kids, it's just a vintage vehicle. He realizes that by giving them safety in the West, he's kind of severed them from his own history.
Speaking of being othered, let's jump to when he first moves west. Chapter 2, Witness. His family moves from Qatar to Montreal, and the weather alone sounds like a horror story.
The famous Montreal wind chill, he describes just standing there, freezing, thinking, how is human civilization even possible at this latitude? But the real shock was the social drop. His dad was a manager in Qatar. He had respect. In Montreal, they were just another immigrant family trying to figure it all out.
But this is where we get the naked lunch story, which is honestly one of the funniest parts of the book.
Right. He's a teenager. He's trying to fit in. He goes to a party, and some guy tells him if he really wants to understand literature, he has to read Naked Lunch by William S. Burroughs. And the guy describes it as, and this is a quote, a book about a man being consumed by his own asshole.
I mean, that's a unique selling point.
It is. So El Akkad goes to the public library, and you have to remember, he comes from a place with censorship. He's terrified. He thinks asking for this book will get him put on a list, maybe even deported. He literally whispers the title to the librarian.
And she doesn't call the authorities.
She just points to the shelf. And for him, that was his real arrival in the West, not the airport, the library. The realization he could read anything, even if it was absolute madness, that was freedom.
But that romantic view starts to crack as he gets older and becomes a journalist. He talks about his hazardous environment training.
Yes, in Virginia. And this is where the book really shifts from memoir into this sharp critique of how we make news. It's surreal. Media companies send reporters to these camps to simulate being in a war zone.
They stage a fake ambush.
Yeah.
Hoods on, screaming, the whole thing.
And there's this one guy, a musician turned sound guy, who just has a total meltdown.
Everyone thinks he's traumatized by the fear of it all.
But no, he starts hyperventilating, and it turns out the hood just reminded him of a really bad S&M experience he had at a club in Berlin.
You can't make this stuff up.
It's too absurd. But that's El Akkad's point. They're just player acting war.
Right.
And this leads him to tear apart the whole idea of objectivity in journalism. He says the Western model is obsessed with being a referee.
Okay, let's dig into that. Because isn't that the goal? We want neutral reporters, don't we?
In theory, sure, but his argument is that the referee just ends up narrating the game without calling out the cheaters. If one side is just lying constantly and the reporter only says, well, side A says this and side B says that, they're not being neutral, they're actually amplifying the lie.
He calls it complicity.
He does, and he uses the coverage of Ukraine versus Gaza as Exhibit A.
A pretty stark contrast.
Oh, absolutely. With Ukraine, the media had no problem using words like heroes and aggressors, active language. But for Palestinians, he points out, it's all passive voice. Bullets find their way into vans. People just die instead of being killed.
It's a way of removing the person doing the killing from the sentence.
It's a tool, he argues, to protect the reader from the reality of who is pulling the trigger.
And this theme of protection and values, it continues. He tells a story about his family trying to drive to LA to see an uncle, and they get stopped at the border.
This is such a crucial moment. His father is detained for hours, no reason given. And El Akkad has this realization: anger is a privilege.
That line really stopped me. We think of anger as just a basic human reaction.
It is, if you belong. If you're a white guy from the suburbs and a cop pulls you over, you might get angry. You might say, I know my rights. But for an immigrant, especially a brown man after 9/11, anger is a death sentence. You have to be calm, rational. You have to swallow your dignity to survive.
And he connects this forced rationality to modern politics, especially the lesser evil argument. We hear this every election.
Every single time. You have to vote for the lesser of two evils. And he just challenges this so aggressively. He's looking at the U.S. election, where so many voters feel completely trapped.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second. Isn't that just being practical? If you don't vote for the lesser evil, you get the greater evil, and that causes even more suffering. Isn't opting out just letting the whole house burn down?
That's the standard argument, and he gets that. But he comes back with this terrifying question. What happens when the lesser evil is also funding a genocide? If your moral floor is just vote for the guy who's a little less monstrous, well, have you lost the floor entirely?
He argues that if you keep voting for a lesser monster, you just end up with a monster. The system never has to actually be better.
Exactly. And he pairs this moral rot with this very visceral image of politicians signing bombs.
Yeah, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, smiling while they sign artillery shells with Sharpies.
It's the festive atmosphere that gets to him. They're treating instruments of death like they're signing a yearbook. It's the total, absolute disconnect between that signature and the body that bomb will eventually tear apart.
What feels like a failure of language, too. Chapter 4 is literally called Language, and he starts with Google Maps.
He does. He's an Iqaluit in the Canadian North, and Google Street View is trying to map the town. The engineers keep asking the local Inuit elders, so where are the roads? And the elders are confused. They say, you mean in winter or summer?
Because in the winter, the frozen sea ice is the road.
Precisely. The Google engineers, their cognitive toolkit, it defined a road as a permanent strip of asphalt. They couldn't wrap their heads around a road that just melts and disappears every year.
So how does that connect to war?
He says we do the exact same thing with people. We use language to sanitize and redefine things to fit our toolkit. We don't say torture, we say enhanced interrogation. We don't say dead civilians, we say collateral damage.
And the one he really focuses on is the definition of terrorist.
The signature strike policy, where the U.S. military can define any military-aged male killed in a strike zone as an enemy combatant unless proven otherwise after they're already dead. He says this defiles the dead twice. First you kill them, then you strip them of their innocence by default so no one has to mourn them.
You erase the crime by renaming the victim. He saw the physical version of this at Guantanamo Bay, which he covers in Resistance. And it's the little details that are so chilling. The coat hooks.
The coat hooks are haunting. They're designed to be collapsible. If you put too much weight on them, they snap down. It's to stop prisoners from hanging themselves. El Akkad calls it this dark benevolence. The system is designed to keep you alive, but only so it can keep you imprisoned.
And then, in this classic El Akkad pivot, he jumps from Gitmo to the movie Red Dawn.
The 2012 remake, yeah. This is a perfect example of how the West sees its enemies as interchangeable. So, in the original script, the Chinese army invades the U.S. But by 2012, China's a huge movie market. You can't sell a movie in China where China's the bad guy.
So they changed it after the movie was already filmed?
Digitally. They went through the whole film and changed all the flags and symbols from Chinese to North Korean, which is, ridiculous. North Korea couldn't invade a 7-Eleven.
But for the audience, it didn't matter.
Not at all, because the enemy is a placeholder. His point is that Americans love the Star Wars story. They always see themselves as the scrappy rebels fighting the big bad empire. It doesn't matter who the empire is.
But in reality, he argues America is the empire.
Correct. And he contrasts this Hollywood fantasy with the real-world case at the International Court of Justice, where South Africa brought genocide charges against Israel. Suddenly, the rules-based order the West loves to talk about was being put to the test.
And what did the West do?
They twisted themselves into knots to dismiss the case. He says we love the idea of law, but only when it applies to our enemies. When it's pointed at us, or our allies, we ignore it.
Which brings us to the role of the writer in all this. Chapter 6, Craft, and the Giller Prize Gala.
This was a fancy black-tie literary event, and protesters got on stage calling for a ceasefire. El Akkad wasn't there, he stayed home, but he watched the reaction online. This room was full of writers who pride themselves on speaking truth to power, but when truth showed up, they either sat in silence or they booed.
It had to be disillusioning.
Deeply. He brings up Hemingway's iceberg theory, the idea that you should show, don't tell. But El Akkad says showing only works if your audience is willing to look. When the audience is actively turning away from dead bodies, a writer can't be subtle. You have to tell. You have to scream.
He also talks about his solid 5 here. And this feels really important. He took a stand-up comedy class.
Yeah, when he first moved to Portland, he developed a solid 5 minutes of material. Self-deprecating stuff about being Arab, airport security, his name, it always killed with liberal white audiences.
Like a survival mechanism. Make the joke before they can.
Exactly. He was performing the role of the good Arab, making himself palatable, non-threatening. But in this chapter, he realizes that performance is a kind of lie. And he decides he's done with the solid 5. He's not going to make the audience comfortable anymore.
That refusal to offer comfort seems to flow right into his take on politics. He looks at the rise of Trump and that whole economic anxiety argument.
He just dismisses that argument entirely. He tells a story about driving through Oregon after these massive wildfires. He sees a pickup truck that was completely burned out, just a metal husk. But still attached to it, still flying, was a Trump flag.
It's a powerful image.
It's the definition of identity politics over everything else. That person lost their property, maybe their livelihood, to a disaster made worse by climate denial. Yet they're still flying the flag of the denier. He says it isn't about money. It's about wanting people who don't look like them to suffer, even if it means burning down your own house to do it.
A loyalty to destruction. And Chapter 8 is called Fear. He goes back to his reporting on the Toronto 18 terrorism plot.
This is a wild story. The ringleader apparently took a young recruit out to the woods at night, showed him a freshly dug grave, and said, if you betray us, this is where you end up.
It sounds like something from a bad movie. El Akkad says he laughed when he heard it.
He did. He thought it was just so melodramatic, but then he realized it worked. The kid was terrified. Fear is effective. But he draws this line between that kind of fear and the dehumanizing fear the West feels. He quotes Thomas Friedman comparing the Middle East to a wasp that needs to be swatted.
An entire region of people compared to an insect.
It's classic dehumanization. And El Akkad puts that abstract fear right next to the very specific, horrifying fear of Hinrijab.
I think we all remember that story. The 6-year-old Palestinian girl trapped in a car with her dead family, on the phone, begging for help.
surrounded by tanks, and the ambulance sent to save her was blown up. His point is that the West's fear, the fear of the wasp, is a currency. It buys wars, it changes laws. But Hind Rajab's fear, the fear of the other, it buys nothing, it changes nothing. It's ignored by the machinery of power.
Which brings us to the final chapter, leave-taking. If nothing else works, what's left? He talks about Aaron Bushnell.
Yeah, the U.S. airman who set himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy shouting, "Free Palestine," and the media immediately tried to say he was mentally ill.
Because they just couldn't understand the act itself.
Because our system is transactional. You do things to get things. Bushnell's act was non-transactional. He wasn't trying to get a raise. He was trying to exit the system entirely. And this is where El Akkad introduces his final, most powerful idea: negative resistance.
Tell us more about that. Because we usually think of resistance as something active. Marching, shouting.
Negative resistance is the act of subtraction. It's not about fighting the system head-on, it's about starving it. It's refusing to buy the product, refusing to go to the gala, refusing to vote for the candidate who funds the bombs.
So simply walking away.
Yes. And he argues the system is actually terrified of this. The system can handle a riot. It has police for that. But it relies on your participation. It needs you to vote, to consume, to watch. If you just stop, the whole machine runs out of fuel. It's the Bartleby the Scrivener approach. I would prefer not to.
And he links this back to his solid 5 comedy routine.
He does. He realizes that stopping that routine, stopping the performance of the good Arab, is his own form of negative resistance. He's no longer asking for permission to exist. He's no longer trying to charm the people who are funding the killing of his people. He's saying goodbye to the West's approval.
So the book ends on this note of leave-taking. It really does feel like he's packing his bags, metaphorically speaking.
He is. He writes that one day, everyone will claim they were against this. They'll rewrite their own memories. But he's leaving this book as a record of the truth of now. He's saying, I saw you, I saw what you did, and what you didn't do.
It's a devastating read, but a necessary one.
Yeah.
It really forces you to look in the mirror.
And that's the question I think we should leave you with. El Akkad is asking, what are you willing to give up to alleviate someone else's suffering? Not just what will you say, but what will you stop doing? Are you willing to be uncomfortable? Are you willing to practice a little negative resistance in your own life?
A powerful thought to end on. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe for more bookish adventures and hit that like button if you enjoyed the ride. Don't forget to share the knowledge, spread the word.